Welcome to the premiere episode of the American Recovery Podcast. This podcast is dedicated to the millions of Americans who are in recovery from a substance use disorder. This podcast is here to inspire hope in people no matter how addiction has impacted their lives. In today's episode, I interviewed Dave Closson, who started DJC Solutions, helping individuals and organizations with substance use prevention, veterans, and law enforcement reach their next level of excellence through facilitation, training, technical assistance, coaching, speaking, media, and online learning through course creation. Dave served 6 years with the Indiana National Guard and served a year-long tour of duty in Iraq starting back in 2005. Dave received a traumatic brain injury his first week in country, which went undiagnosed for over a decade. Dave struggled with a substance use disorder along the way, but has 4 years of sustained ongoing recovery. And he's here to tell us all about his journey in and out of addiction and the way it has inspired his work ever since. Dave Closson, welcome to the American Recovery Podcast.
Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to be here talking with you, Daniel.
No, I appreciate you taking the time. Hey, so the goal of this podcast is to help tell recovery stories, help people find relatable pieces with other individuals who have gone through recovery, to kind of make connections with the general public so they understand and can have some compassion and support for the people who are maybe going through active addiction and haven't yet found recovery. But also, the goal is also to provide some hope for people who are in the early stages of recovery, that not only does it get better, they can maintain the course for recovery. They can maintain it long term. And so that's what we're trying to do here. We're hoping to just tell stories that inspire others and genuinely build towards understanding addiction better, but also helping people into recovery and through recovery in the process as well. So tell us about your recovery story, Dave.
Yeah, all right. Gosh, where to start? First, I kind of want to go on a little soapbox and
Yeah.
related to inspired by just that little intro as to the why behind this podcast and bringing hope to folks that recovery is possible. And I was just speaking last week, actually, talking about the positive, and the positive does exist. And when it comes to especially combat veterans like myself, which I'll kind of tell a little bit about my background, of course, but the media, you look to TV, to movies, and whenever a veteran is portrayed as having PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, they always give them this distant stare. They make them look different. They portray them as broken, crazy, dangerous, violent, extreme. And it's not like that at all. Doesn't depict what a combat veteran who is struggling with PTSD or addiction looks like or acts like or thinks like at all. And it just reinforces this stigma that becomes a barrier to seeking help. It doesn't bring hope. They never talk about those veterans, those soldiers, seeking and achieving, maintaining, celebrating recovery, healing from their trauma, breaking their addiction. They never showcase that. They don't show hope. And so, yeah, I'm glad to have these conversations with folks like you to really bring hope to the forefront and let folks know that there is hope and recovery is possible. Yeah. So that's my rant. I don't remember what you asked me, but that was my thought, and I had to throw it out there.
We're digging into your recovery story, and I agree. I think there's a desire to put a visual element to a mental health struggle, which overlaps with the PTSD and the substance use disorders that are often encountered with our troops and our veterans who have experienced trauma or active combat injuries, things like that. And so I think most people can't visualize it. And so this Hollywood mentality of let's put a behavior to a problem as opposed to how is this actually affecting people and how can we help? Because most of the time it's this heroes going into save said veteran sort of motif to it. It's not a journey for recovery or for resilience. It's this they can't save themselves. We have to go in and do it. And that mentality, I agree. I think that can shape the way we look at people who are going through that and say, oh, we don't do something nobody else is. And then it brings into question all the systems in place, whether they're doing a good job or not. How are we funding them? Does funding matter versus quality of care? And it creates this rabbit hole of questions and problems to chase down where we haven't actually set a proper context for what those people are going through. So kind of introduce your story to us as far as your time in service, and then what brought you on that journey that ultimately ran through a time of substance use.
Yeah, so how far back to start? Ooh, I would say my journey really started during Vietnam. And no, I was not alive during Vietnam, but my father was, and he volunteered for the draft and joined the Army, Airborne Ranger, and he was a Ranger team leader. Excuse me. And in Vietnam, he was leading his Ranger team as they did the recon work on what would become Hamburger Hill. They made a movie about the very tragic battle of Hamburger Hill, but this was before the fact. He was doing the recon work there, and they were set up in their 360 at night on top of this hill, and he got struck by lightning in Vietnam. Medevac, all that stuff. And so right from the get-go, before I was even born, his genes, his DNA kind of got a little fried. Then he passed that DNA on to me. So that all kind of made me a little different. But no, I tell that story because my dad's my hero. He went on to retire as a sergeant major, highest enlisted rank possible. He's a legend. He's a legend. And that military ethos is in my blood. It's in my DNA. It's hardwired in. And so I enlisted in the Illinois Army National Guard when I was 17, going on 18, because I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps, but I also still kind of wanted to chart my own path as well. So I didn't want to be an Army Ranger. I wanted to be a sniper, though. So still sort of an elite position. And so I started that journey. But I picked the National Guard because I wanted to have my cake and eat it too. I wanted the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Wanted to have a civilian life, but also still be able to go be a sniper and achieve those dreams and goals there as well. Fast forward a few years, life happens and I'm in college, and it's the start of my junior year, actually. Halfway through that first semester, I got deployed to Iraq. I was 21 years old, and I actually got sent on our advanced party. So I went down to Fort Stewart, Georgia, just our recon team. We got trained up. So then when the rest of our unit came down, we were the ones training them. Then we all shipped out and went to Iraq, and our first day in country, landed at Biop Airport, figuring out, okay, where are our little huts at? Where are we going to stay? Just literally getting our feet on the ground. And we had guys injured by a mortar attack. That very first day, welcome to Iraq, and this is May of 2005. Still, things were kind of the wild, wild west back then. In fact, actually, they told us our first sector was the Wild West, and be prepared for craziness. Yeah, so that was first day in country, had guys wounded, and then my first week, I was driving a Humvee. We were doing our right seat, left seat rides where the unit we were replacing, we were taking over their sector so they could ship home. They're just giving us a tour saying, hey, this is your area of operation. This is where this is. This is where this is. Hey, watch out for this area and all of that intel. We got blown up. We got hit with an improvised explosive device and ended up having a traumatic brain injury. But that traumatic brain injury went undiagnosed for several years, actually from 2005 until 2017.
So that was week one.
Yes, that was week one in country. And I should also add too, at the time it didn't register with me, but now that I reflect back on my journey, I was back on patrol the day after being blown up. I didn't go see the docs, no MRI, no anything. Just, hey man, you good? Yeah, my ears are ringing. I got a headache, but I'm good. Had to go right back out on patrol. Never got a chance to be evaluated or even emotionally process the fact that I'd just been blown up and had a legit near-death experience. I had to just embrace the suck and drive on and just get after it. And that mindset, that mentality, that not having time to process ends up playing a big role in my mental health, my addiction, and recovery as well.
So in reality, you had not only you had no time to get acclimated there. First week, you're already catching fire and receiving this injury. Is more or less the response of people when you're in country like that. Hey, can you walk? Are you good? Are you bleeding? All right, then get back out there. So is that kind of the mentality that is taken?
Yes, yes. I should say then in 2005, the conversation, the knowledge around PTSD, oral injury, and TBI, traumatic brain injuries, had elevated since then. There's a lot more support, resources, and knowledge around them. So things probably a little bit different now,
Okay.
but absolutely had to embrace the suck and drive on, because you don't have a choice. You can't just call timeout in combat. I need to take a quick break and catch my breath, kind of thing.
So how long were you in country then?
Just a couple days shy of 1 year. Ended up leading one of my awards in the little write-up. They said they calculated that I led over 180 combat patrols. Then my sniper team was the most successful in our battalion as well. So we were rocking. Our unit was great. We were very successful. Built great rapport with the local civilians, and in turn, since they trusted us and knew we were there to help them, they then helped us help them. So one example being, before we took over our first AO, which was the city of Abu Ghraib, not the prison, but the actual city. And the base there, our base, was being hit with rockets and mortars every single day coming from our sector. So then once they put our team, my sniper team, into play, after 3 successful missions, we went an entire month without any rocket or mortar attacks. So, I mean, we made a big difference just in that one AO. We ended up having 3 different AOs because they moved us around because we were doing so good. Like, hey, can you go clean up this one? Hey, can you go clean up this one?
How much beyond the TBI that you suffered did the impact of active combat and sort of doing what is necessary for a soldier in the field of combat? How much of that do you think played an impact on the fallout that you experienced afterwards?
Yeah, I would say a huge amount, in that it is trauma. It all caused, the more I learn about myself and I learn about trauma and addiction and recovery, the more I see it all woven throughout my story. I kind of alluded to or hinted the fact that I never had the chance to process being blown up. I never had the chance to process what it was like being a sniper in Iraq. I never had the chance to process any of the traumatic events of trauma that I experienced during that year. And it comes back to that. I had to be back out on patrol. I had to go to work. I couldn't hit pause. And what I thought was resilience back then was just, sheer grit, taking those emotions and putting them in a box. And my resilience, my strength, my bravado was my ability to keep those things contained in that box. That's what I thought it was, but that was a huge misperception. Huge misperception.
How much of that do you think is pure survival, kind of managing your situation? Because, yeah, resilience and survival look very different. And I think that's one of the conversations that is happening in prevention and in recovery, because there's so much more to learn about resilience, because people can survive a whole lot. And it doesn't mean damage isn't being done. And it doesn't mean that the way you are surviving is beneficial long term. So how much of that do you think played a part?
So in the short term, real time, it was about survival. But because I never, even after the fact, days, months, when I came back, never processed, never unpacked or dealt with or worked with that trauma, that underlying trauma, I've been carrying it with me. And that takes a toll on your body and your mind and your heart and your soul when it's left undealt with.
So what did dealing with it ultimately look like for you?
Dude, I'm still dealing with it. Actually, I am finally just now starting the VA's trauma recovery program because in my journey, I've developed very healthy coping mechanisms. I've built a very healthy mindset, very healthy habits, routines, an overall healthy lifestyle. But because I've never actually talked through and unpacked and processed my trauma, it's still there and playing a part, impact in my well-being. One example being one of the intake sessions for the trauma recovery program, I had to just bullet point list a highlight reel of not even all of my traumas. Just, hey, what comes to mind? Just give us a bullet point list. Don't tell the story. Don't relive it. Just, hey, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Like I did here. Hey, we had guys injured the first day, got blown up, 180 combat patrols, blah, 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 blah. My Whoop fitness tracker, after the fact, said, hey, you just logged an activity. Picked it up as a workout. My heart rate was at 154 beats per minute while I was just creating a bullet pointed list. So that's fascinating. The fact, here's raw data, the impacts trauma has on my body because I haven't processed it. But then also the fact it didn't register up here that my body was having that kind of response tells me that my stress baseline, my tolerance, I'm used to being so high stress that didn't even register, which is also a big warning, red light flashing, saying, hey, that's not healthy. And so that's part of why I'm not able to feel joy, is because I'm always stressed out carrying around this trauma.
Hmm, that's an interesting perspective because I think I never tied those two together. It makes
Mhm,
sense when you're talking about trauma and all the stress that goes with
mhm,
traumatic brain injuries, but how it directly correlates to other emotions. Nobody looks at joy and goes, "That's really like one of those happy people." No, nobody sort of takes that approach and lists it as a bad thing, but we
mhm,
very much take it for granted
mhm,
when it's just absent. And I think there's a point where you stop being aware that pieces of you or pieces of your emotional spectrum are
mhm,
just flat out missing. I think that realization would just be kind of shocking to have.
mhm.
Can you ballpark like, where at in the process did you have that realization that as a result of what you had gone through, that you had flat out lost that joy from your life or that ability to experience?
Yeah. So a couple things are coming to mind, and I would say it wasn't a big light bulb moment, but sort of smaller pivotal moments. One being I was at my grandfather's funeral, and I remember sitting there looking around and seeing people, crying, being very emotional as you would expect at a funeral. And I didn't feel anything. I wouldn't, I wasn't letting myself feel anything. I didn't know how. Like I was just kind of there. And that was a moment I was like, okay, something's not right here. And so I had to learn that it was okay to let myself have feelings or emotions, which is scary as shit. Oh my gosh. But that relates to my trauma and the fact that I didn't feel safe. When you don't feel safe, you want to protect yourself so you don't let yourself, show emotion. There's survival, right? Fight or flight, survival. So I had to learn to let myself feel. Then I had to really work through and try to understand what those feelings were as well. Like, okay, I feel something. What is this? So as I grew through this process, learning how to feel, learning how to understand what those feelings were, then it slowly became apparent that, I don't laugh uncontrollably. It's always a controlled, forced laugh. I don't have that overabundance bursting with joy that, all of my positive emotions are very measured, very calculated. And I don't know how to just be goofy and be silly. It I don't know how. And so it started to slowly sort of evolve and become aware of that. No real big turning point. Like I can't feel joy or happiness. I feel like for me, happy is more just like a content. Like, yeah, this is good. That's happy for me. And now that I have a better awareness of emotions and norms and like, oh, but I want to feel that.
Mm. It's a fascinating insight to have because I don't think people recognize the impact trauma has on that. And then I feel like there's this mentality of, oh, so and so is just miserable to be around. And when the positive spectrum of emotions is cut short for you, where in reality you found this center in the trauma that I don't ex- I don't express extreme negative or extreme
Mm-hmm.
positive emotions. It's just I am in the zone and existing, and that's just my life. It's a baseline. I mean, life is about the highs and lows. We want to be able to experience like yeah, the lows suck, but they also set us up for when good things happen. We have a stark perspective to have when you know where you've come from and you can kind of acknowledge that and then go, but now I'm here. It's awesome that I'm here. When that's just missing, it's like you're in the car, passed out. I didn't realize we drove all the way across the country. We stopped at all these places, and I don't remember most of it.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people with some things that I went through that there are just gaps in my memory where I go, I know these big events happened, and I know the approximate times they happened. I can't tell you what happened in between.
Mm-hmm.
Those were just days I was alive. And they're more or less days that have been wasted because
Mm-hmm.
you might have gone to work, you could have had a positive impact, and then you get down and you go, it didn't mean anything to me. It didn't register as I went and did this, I accomplished that. The details just get lost, and that's a fascinating perspective because I don't think many people think about it, how it affects the emotional regulation, but also in the emotional spectrum of what you can experience. People don't see that.
And not just with the trauma blocking. Well, for another thing, so I'm working with a nervous system coach right now to sort of recalibrate my nervous system because it's so used to being stressed to the max that picture the letter U. You have your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous systems, and you're basically either in your fight or flight when you're sort of at the top of the U, that
Mhm.
max hyper alert, vigilant, like stressed out, like, oh my gosh, fight or flight, literally, or fight, flight, freeze, I guess, or fawn. There's a couple different variations of it now. But then on the other side of that U, there's more the restorative, the relaxed, the free spirit, the recharging. But when you have trauma and you're stressed, you're always going to be over here like redlining on your tachometer on your car, like ding 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 ding. You never have a chance to slow down back to an idle to kind of recover and restore and get ready to go again. You're always up here. And even when you're maxed out at the red line, you get a little bit of joy. It'll bring you down, but you're still not going to be over here on the upswing. You're going to be coming back towards the middle if lucky. And so that's kind of where I've been living. But then talking about not being able to feel positive emotions, my neurotransmitters are also out of balance. So I get really geeked out here in that I did a test with Wired Biohealth where they evaluated 85 biomarkers, my DNA, my neurotransmitters, my hormones, and everything that are all associated to mental health and addiction. My serotonin, folks are usually familiar with serotonin, SSRIs like Zoloft, Lexapro, those different drugs and all that stuff. My serotonin was off the charts high. My dopamine, norepinephrine, my epinephrine, all off the charts low, virtually non-existent. And so when I say I can't feel joy or happiness, those are the neurotransmitters that, help you feel joy and happiness. Dopamine, right? Makes you feel happy. And so my brain chemistry also is holding me back from being able to really experience and feel joy. It's just like mind blowing that the data is like, okay, I can be fixed. Like there's hope. Like, okay, let's boost these neurotransmitters. Let's get them back sort of optimized and balanced. let's go through the trauma recovery program. And,
How much would you recommend people look into that as far as identifying their biometric
yeah, the
markers?
biomarkers. Oh my gosh, I am a huge proponent. Like, absolutely, absolutely. More details on why I'm a fan of it is that, I went to the VA for mental health treatment, and I showed up and said, I shared my story, bullet points, what happened, and trying to express my feelings. They hear me say, I just don't feel happy. I want to feel happy. I feel just subjectively based upon my vocabulary, they're hearing depression. And so you need an SSRI. You need like Zoloft or something like that to boost your serotonin because you're depressed. But that's not really the case. So looking at my DNA, I actually have a genetic marker that says SSRIs are not effective, which, surprise, surprise, it made my life even worse. And the normal protocol would be, oh, hey, Dave, that didn't work for you. Let's try a different SSRI. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try a different SSRI. A guessing game, all based upon me verbalizing my feelings. That's how they're diagnosing these prescription medicines to mess with your mental health, your brain chemistry. And so when you do the actual test, you can see your actual results, your hard data, and you can figure out your treatment protocol, your prescriptions based upon that, rather than a guessing game of, what I say when I say I don't feel happy versus when you say it can mean completely different things.
Yeah.
Completely different. But that's the way the system is set up right now. And so, yeah, absolutely do it, because why wouldn't you want to actually have hard data and have your treatment tailored specifically to you, down to your DNA, rather than just play a guessing game of, here, try this drug, come back in 4 months. Here, try this one, come back in 4 months. Like, the science is there.
Yeah, the length of time in between is amazing, but if you're maxed out as far as your serotonin output already, do the SSRIs still boost it further, or does it become this like categorically unpleasant reaction to them because you're already overproducing and those aren't going to come in and
So
balance you?
it will just increase your serotonin more, and increased serotonin, like too high, causes increased agitation, mood disorders, depression, the same things I'm actually seeking treatment for. So
So
it
they
just
would see
makes
that
them
as
worse.
depression and then prescribe something,
Mm-hmm.
and that would actively exacerbate what was already there. Did they follow up and try to do anxiety medications next, or try the antidepressant roulette system that they were working on already?
Yeah. So they tried me on one drug first, and it made life a living hell. I couldn't sleep at night. I mean, it was miserable. So after 2 months, then it was okay. Well, let's switch to a different one. Switch me to the lowest dose of this other one. Like, I don't know if it's working. Like, I don't feel any different. Like, it is what it is. Okay, let's up the dose. So 2 months later, they up the dose. Come back like, I got nothing. I don't know. Like, what am I supposed to feel? Like, I feel the same. Oh, yeah, let's up the dose. They up the dose 3 times. And this is, 2 months in between each appointment. And I'm still not feeling any different. I'm feeling about the same. Just like, okay, yeah, life sucks. And that led me to feel hopeless. Like, they're just doing an experiment on me. They're just guessing. And, well, apparently, they can't help me. I'm not making any progress. So losing hope. And
So
that's going to just send somebody into a spiral.
so so did that sort of reinforce this "I can't be helped"
Yes.
mentality?
Yep.
Wow.
It reinforced the whole I'm broken. I guess this is just the way it is. This is my, dare I say, new normal after the whole COVID pandemic. And we use that phrase all the time now. But is this just the
Ugh.
way it is now? Like, I just have to embrace the suck and drive on? Like, is there no hope to get better?
You touched on one of the pillars that lead people down the path to suicide, because the it's not going to
Mm-hmm.
get better, or this
Yep.
is as good as it gets and it's terrible. It's usually one of the pillars. As soon as you start getting to it's never going to get better, and then you get to I'm a burden, and people would be better off. That it's like as soon as you complete that sort of triad of
Mm-hmm.
extreme negative emotions about yourself, you're right there. Like
Yep.
you're a plan away from
Mm-hmm.
suicide, more or less. Did did that kind of approach or that sort of way of thinking encroach on you in the process?
It did not. I never reached the darkness of suicide ideation. or contemplation. There were times where I had some very deep depression and just wanted to withdraw from society, be by myself in the woods. But I never did have thoughts of suicide.
A lot of people, it's like an option that
Mm-hmm.
you never want to exercise, but you've always got in
Mm-hmm.
your back pocket. And people don't think of it that way. They think of it
Yeah.
as this like horrible thing that you would do to yourself and everybody around you. And the base part of suicide is not, I'm going to run a buzzsaw through this family and leave it in shambles. It is, I am the buzzsaw. I am making things worse for people. And then once that mentality of they would be better off without me kind of creeps in, even as you recover from that, even as you get more balanced or you start to find some hope, that's a thing that's there in your low times. That is this underlying, it's there if I need it. Because there's a piece of it that feels like you have an option you can lean on. And it's not the way a lot of people want to think about it. And so, but when people feel trapped, that's typically when they would actually take their way out, so to speak, as opposed to when they look at that and go, I've considered this. I don't want to do this, but I know my mind goes there and I can recognize that and I can do something about it. So
I can see like how that process, my journey could have easily pushed me into that crisis point. I mean, I had reached out in November saying, hey, I want mental health treatment. I need it. And I met with the prescriber, but I didn't get to meet with a therapist. I started on the SSRI journey in January, and that was, every 2 months ongoing. I didn't get to meet with an actual counselor until March. So asked for help in November, didn't get to actually talk to somebody until March. In the meantime, I'm playing this guessing game of SSRI drugs, losing hope and feeling more and more broken and unfixable. And I had 2 sessions with my therapist and they quit. So then to start with a new one as well. So like all of this is just like compounding. And I could easily see how that could just comes back to hope. Breaking down somebody's hope, just that time. Yeah.
it's too common. I think of one of the more viral videos involving a veteran. There's been a couple of that have come out in the last year or two. And one of them was just a guy who was just in a full blown breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
And he had multiple mental health counselors or psychiatrists that he started with, and in the process of like 6 months to a year, he had been through 3 or 4 of them, and it wasn't because they were like, "Oh, he's XYZ," or "I'm." They just weren't there long enough
Mm-hmm.
to make a long term difference. So his complaint was continuity of care. There was just none, and I don't know how to solve that problem because there has to be the motivation for people to get into it, but
Mm-hmm.
also stay. And I don't know that a lot of civilians are mentally prepared because they don't talk about that enough when they're
Mm-hmm.
preparing people for mental health counseling jobs. Is that, by the way, you're going to end up taking a little bit of this home. It's not yours, but you're going to wear it for a while, and it's not going to be pleasant. And so, if you get into uh, law enforcement, military, people who've gone through any kind of assault, especially of a sexual nature, you end up taking these pieces home that people aren't equipped to handle it, even if it didn't happen to them. It's a problem that we're going to have to figure out a way to address in this country because people need the help, and I believe counseling has a huge role in it, but we're not doing a very good job of helping the people who need that help most because just what you described, there's no continuity of care, there's no reliable testing that actually sets people up for the
Mm-hmm.
proper prescriptions. It just lines people up for really, really difficult and disastrous results. Because we talked about the options it could have gone down for you. I'm so glad it didn't. But the number of stories I hear that are similar to yours that go right down that, like, there's a reason the
Mm-hmm.
statistics are what they are on suicide for veterans and for police officers. And we haven't even gotten into your time in law enforcement yet. Thanks everyone for tuning in to the American Recovery Podcast. Check out the show notes for links to resources we discussed in this episode. We discuss some serious elements of mental health, including suicide. If you are going through a difficult time and need someone to talk to or speak with about having thoughts of suicide, call the National Suicide Hotline at 988 or 800-273-8255. And for veterans, call 988, then press 1, or text 838-255. There's also a link in the show notes where veterans can go to chat with someone online. Dave discussed the Wired Biohealth biomarker test he took as part of his journey to understand his mental and physical health as well. The link for that is going to be in the show notes. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.